Okay, so welcome to this session, to this debate of the Bled Strategic Forum. I should say at the beginning that it is organized in partnership with Wilfried Martens Centre for European Studies, which is the official political foundation of the EPP, where I myself am a strategic coordinator and senior research officer. And the idea that the title, as you see, is Future of Europe, Diversity and Consensus. And the idea of the panel was to discuss a little bit, to try and map out areas of agreement and disagreement in the Future of Europe debate, with reference particularly to the Future of Europe conference that began in the first part of the year, as you know, and focusing on differences between the main European political families, which is a topic that is often a bit under the radar, but important. We will not only focus on that, the main focus will be differences and disagreements between the main European political families. I couldn't hope for a better panel. We have a very rich representation from the different political sensitivities, and I briefly introduce the speakers that you can see sitting to my left. I will introduce them in alphabetical order, and I will also give them the floor later in alphabetical order. I start with François Decoster. You are the chairman, the president of the Renew Europe group in the European Committee of the Regions, one of the main advisory body of the EU that gives representation, as we know, to regional and local politicians. Welcome. Good evening to everyone. Olgierd Geblewicz, welcome. You are the president of the EPP group in the European Committee of the Regions, the same committee, therefore. Then we have Giorgia Meloni. Welcome, Ms. Meloni. You are the president of the European Conservatives and Reformists Party since last year, so I believe now the sixth biggest group in the European Parliament, and also the president of Fratelli d'Italia, a right-wing party in Italy. Welcome. Christophe Rouillon, welcome. You are the president of the Party of the European Socialist group in the European Committee of the Regions. You can see that we have a very rich representation from the European Committee of the Regions. We continue with Christa Schweng, who instead represent the European Economic and Social Committee as its president. We were supposed to have two digital speakers, which, however, I do not see. So I look to the technical people to... okay, so there they are. So the two digital speakers are Apostolos Tzitzikostas, president of the European Committee of the Regions, and Manfred, who is chairman of the EPP group in the European Parliament, therefore the biggest group in the European Parliament. Welcome, Chairman Weber. Finally, I come back to the room, last but not least, Marco Zanni, who is president of the Identity and Democracy group, so the group that in the European Parliament spectrum is most to the right. Very briefly to introduce the topic, I told myself how to start, and I concluded what is better than a Konrad Adenauer quote. And the quote that I have chosen is the following: we all live under the same sky, but we don't all have the same horizon. And I thought this is a fitting quote for a panel whose purpose is mapping out political differences on the future of Europe. For a long time, the political debate on the future of Europe was not very polarized. We had about 50 years, I would say, of what was called permissive consensus in European integration. Citizens didn't care much about European integration. Things changed subtly, if you think about it, with the poly-crisis that we have been experiencing over the last 10 years. First, the economic and financial crisis, then the euro crisis, then the migration crisis, which was a big blow to the legitimacy of the Union, and more recently, of course, the pandemic and everything that may come after. So I think this period of crisis, this age of crisis, all of a sudden has brought home to Europeans that Europe matters, that EU policies have a direct impact on their lives, and that Therefore, there is scope for a political debate. And all of a sudden, Europe has become very politicized, and things have become very polarized, and that's why we are having this conference, and that's why we are here with our speakers. So, without further ado, I will start with a question to François Decoster. You are the only liberal Renew Europe, shall we say, representative on the panel. So we are interested in your perspective both as a Committee of the Region person, but also as a liberal Renew Europe politician. And I would ask you, what would you list as the 3 most important changes that the EU should undergo, in your opinion, to secure its future, and that should be at the center of the conference on the future of Europe? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the question. And my first answer would be also related and connected to your introduction. What is this conference on the future of Europe? This is a unique opportunity. And actually, the Liberal family has called for such an opportunity. In the text of introduction of this panel, you've made a reference to the failure of the convention. And I think that in the 15 years that followed the failure of the ratification of the Treaty on the Constitution, I mean, we really paid a high price of that failure. So now we have a possibility to organize a new exercise. It has to be different. It has been shaped differently. And actually, the Liberal family has called for that exercise to be. And we have even changed the name of our political family. Renew Europe, it's a new name for the Liberal and Democrat at the European level. So my first answer is really to what I hope is that we will make the method that we have created together work. That is to say that obviously there are representatives, elected representatives of institutions, of national parliaments, of EU institutions, but there's also an important role for the citizens. We have created digital platforms. It is of our responsibility to make them work. We need the people of Europe to be part of the conference on the future of Europe. So that will be my first answer, because this is a key element so that the result of the conference will really meet the expectations of the people. Probably we have only that changed and we cannot miss it. Second answer is, I will make another quote, not of Konrad Adenauer, but I thought it was a very good one, but a quote by Zoran Zaev that I heard just a few minutes ago, the Prime Minister of North Macedonia, in a previous session. We were talking about enlargement, and he said, we are European because we share the European values. I could not agree more. But this is something that I expect from the conference, and the Liberal family expects from the conference. We have to, if we want to build the future of Europe, we have to remind why we have created the European Union, why we have created the European project. What are the values that are really the basis of this unique construction in the history and in the world? And this is all based on values. And the Liberal family has really stressed the importance to create a new mechanism, efficient, within the EU, to protect the values, the European values. Because we can see that some of the values, diversity, respect of human rights, of differences, are not respected in the member states, be it at the national, at the regional, or at the local levels. And we took many examples in the last month about this. And that cannot be tolerated anymore. Because if we don't respect together our common values, then we are not a European Union. The European Union is not a single market. The European Union is not only a technical issue. This is a political issue. And a political issue is funded on values, and I expect that the conference will help us to better protect the European values. Third answers, not to be too long, is something that is more connected by the fact that we are members of the Committee of the Regions. We truly think, and I think this is common to all of us, but they will confirm or not later on, we represent 1 million elected people at local and regional levels. You said we are an advisory body. This is true. But I think that our voice counts, and it should count more. The thing is that when you take a poll, the politicians that still have the trust of the people are the politicians that are at the closest point to the citizens. And actually, every day we can meet the people in the streets. They question us. They tell us about their fears. The thing is that the European Union has to use that more. And we have made a proposal recently at the level of the Committee of the Regions. This is an experience that has been done in Austria. In every town in Austria, in any municipal council, there is one elected member who is assigned to be the correspondent of Europe. That is to say, he receives or she receives the information provided by the institutions. Not that it is an elected person in charge of European affairs, because in my country where we have 36 towns and villages, it would make no sense. But in 36 towns and villages, there could be one person receiving the information. I've done that in my urban district myself, based on the Austrian example. So this is something that we would like to push. We are going to advocate that idea within the conference, but also directly tomorrow, actually, with Christophe, Rouillon, we're going to meet the president of the Slovenian towns to explain that and to propose him to try to use the Slovenian presidency also to diffuse that idea. So 3 basic answers.
So if I can summarize the 3 things: participation, values, bottom-up governance. That's how I would summarize them, but there will be an occasion to come back on some of these points. Thank you very much. I'd like to now address Mr. Geblewicz and maybe move a little bit from challenges to, well, principles and values to an extent, which were already mentioned by Mr. Decoster. And so I would ask you from a center-right perspective, you are a center-right politician from Poland, regional politician. What would you see as the most important principles that should inspire the development of Europe in the 2020s, and what instruments do we have to implement them?
Thank you very much for this question and for the possibility to have this intervention today. I think that in Europe we don't need a revolution. We need a smart evolution to have a strong Europe close to the people, close to the citizen. So, as I'm a central right politician, for me it is very easy to point these values, point these principles. It is subsidiarity, certainly, because it is the one of the main root of our political family. It is cohesion, still. It is something what really collected us in this European idea, and something what should be maintained and as one of the main principles in Europe, and rule of law. Because when we don't like to respect law at any level, our European house doesn't make sense. So just to develop these issues, the first thing regarding to, or first remarks regarding to subsidiarity. We can say, okay, it is in all our treaties subsidiarity. Why you are mentioning this principle? I think that we have to look how this principle is respected. I think that we need real subsidiarity and active subsidiarity. Why I mention real subsidiarity? I'm from Poland, but it is not only Polish case. We very often can hear in Brussels from national governments, okay, don't touch it in the Brussels because of subsidiarity. Because we have subsidiarity principle, so it should be, you know, close to the people on the national level. But in the same time, the same governments decentralized all government in the countries. So it is some kind of paradox, and I'm talking about real subsidiarity. I mean, where respecting all levels, this local, regional level as a main level, this national and this European. If we want to have Europe, strong Europe, close to the citizen, we as a local and regional authorities are implementing, they count it as something like 70% of European legislation. We appeal for active subsidiarity, and that means we want to be not only subject of the law, but we want to have some kind of influence during in the early step of legal way. So I think that still we have to create some kind of new mechanism how to involve local and regional leaders in the shaping EU law, actually. Second, cohesion. Cohesion means that every person in Europe, living in every village, in every city, in every region, have the same rights to grow, to develop, to have a good perspective, to have a good life. So we cannot flatten this idea only to the national level. We have to have it on the local and regional level as well, because we know, especially in bigger countries, just like Poland, for example, that we have completely different challenges in different regions, completely different problems in different cities, and so on and so on. So we can say, okay, it is in the treaties, but we should look how it is respected. For example, we can discuss how the process of shaping, of designing recovery national plans was performed in different countries, because I discussed with my colleagues from many countries, not only from Poland, and they all complain that they were not involved. So if we create such a huge instrument, financial instrument, to have not only recovery, but to be more coherent, we cannot exclude local and regional politicians. So it should be the rule, the one of the main rules, that every such a decision should be taken together. And of course, rule of law, as I said, it is one of our fundamentals. We have to discuss, we have to think how to shape in efficient, smart, agile way our law. But law is law. When it is adopted, it has to be respected. And it is my position, and it is position of our EPP party. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, subsidiarity, cohesion, rule of law, important things that I believe there will be time to discuss more in depth later on. And maybe already starting with Giorgia Meloni, I would now like to give the floor to you. You are since last year the president of a party that used to call itself, when the Tories were the leading force, Euro-realist, but that unless I have mistaken and I have not observed the trend carefully enough, is now using more and more the word confederal to describe its vision of Europe. And so if that observation is correct, I would like to ask you, what do you mean when you speak of a confederal vision of Europe for the European conservative and reformist parties? And even maybe more interestingly, how does this differ from the position of other parties of the center and the right, the EPP, for example, on the center, and at the right, ID, represented here by Mr. Zanni, with which you are allied at the national level, Forza Italia being the Italian incarnation, of course, of the EPP, and Lega being the Italian incarnation of identity and democracy. Giorgia Meloni, the floor is yours.
Well, good evening to everybody. First of all, let me tell that I'm very honored to be here to participate in this debate. I want to thank the organization of this forum. I absolutely believe that this is the time of an open and honest conversation about the future of Europe, and I think it is quite precious to be here together with representatives of different institutions, and moreover with a representative of different political families talking about that. As you pointed out, in Strasbourg was opened the conference on the future of Europe, and my opinion is that it was strongly desired by the European establishment in order to push even more towards the same solution as always. That means an ever closer union that provides for a greater transfer of sovereignty from the national level to the supranational one. The federalists are trying to push to promote a super state that, in my opinion, is quite hostile to the European nations, and doing that, they usually define themselves as the only pro-Europe subjects, and consequently, who doesn't agree with this theory is accused to be anti-Europe. And let me say that it is the same mechanism that mainstream media and politicians use in many other fields. I mean, if you want to secure borders, you immediately become racist. If you want to defend traditional family values, you immediately become homophobic and so on. But it is labels and nothing else. And these labels are needed to delegitimize the opponents and to avoid from confronting each other on the merit. Me, I don't need to run away from this merit, so coming back to Europe, we simply do not believe in a European superstate. This year party doesn't believe in a European superstate. On the contrary, we believe that the current EU should evolve towards a confederal model. It means to work for a different EU which concentrates its initiatives and its economic resources on only on some important subject in which we can truly offer an added value, leaving the most part of the minor aspects of our daily life to the competence of the national states. And I think it should be done in accordance with the principle of subsidiarity, which is in the European treaties, but has always been ignored by the European institutions. And defending this principle, I think that is part of the Catholic social doctrine that was reaffirmed by the founding fathers in order to protect the differences between the European nation, should be also a common playing field for the, at least for the center-right political families. So our goal is a new definition of the competencies of the EU, the establishment, as I said, of a confederal Europe based on free cooperation between nations and people, and not on the centralization of powers in the hands of Brussels technocrats. What I'm trying to underline is that, to answer to your question, that there is a third way between the uncritical pro-Europeanism that wants to reduce national sovereignty and the anti-Europeanism that tend to deny the usefulness of any initiative of the EU. This way is the one that the European conservatives are proposing, which is a pragmatic Euro-realistic approach, where EU does less, but does it better. We know there is an open debate about the issue of a strategic autonomy for Europe. We don't want to escape from this challenge, especially today when the pandemic crisis has shown the need to shorten value chains in many productive sectors in order to reduce our dependence from the outside, especially from China. And particularly now, when the Afghan disaster and the announced US will of doing step back in their worldwide leadership gives the EU the chance to act in a new major role. We are ready to discuss on all these issues, but we need to remember that before talking about the instruments, we need a common approach based on consensus and respect of diversity. So the question we have to do ourselves is are we ready for this challenge? I mean, do we have European leadership who are able to lead this process? Are we available to give up on attacking the opponents and trying to understand their arguments? Unfortunately, my feeling is that nowadays EU is not yet ready. And this is the reason why we are apparently in the paradox to have the word reformist in our political family name, being the ones who want to defend, in this moment, strongly defend the current treaties. Maybe it is why Sir Roger Scruton taught us that it is always right to keep things as they are, in case worse things are proposed to replace them. So this is my idea, and my desire for the future of Europe is that its ruling class will be able to say good things we have achieved so far, while at the same time will be capable to be courageous and visionary.
Thank you very much. Well, I think we already see emerging some disagreement about the interpretation of values, for example. All the speakers so far mentioned subsidiarity, but clearly not all of them mentioned it exactly in the same sense. So you see political differences start emerging quite clearly. I now go towards Christophe Rouillon to bring also, to go back, yes, to the Committee of the Region, but also to bring the socialist perspective into the discussion. Again, you are the only socialist with us today. So I would ask you to give us, yes, the perspective of the Committee of the Region, but again also a socialist sensitivity to the Future of Europe debate and to the Future of Europe conference. And maybe again, I would ask you, what would you list as the 3 top issues that are indispensable to secure the future of Europe from a socialist perspective?
Thanks so much. I'm the only one socialist on the floor, but I'm not scared, however. Dear colleagues, dear Mr. Préau, many thanks for your question and for inviting me to take part in this debate as president of the Socialist group in the European Committee of the Region. I see that our institution is very well representative here, and I do think that this reflects the interest of live expectation of regional and local authorities concerning the conference on the future of Europe. This exercise was launched after a long, maybe too long period of reflection about its purpose, its composition, and its methodology. Let's be honest amongst ourselves. It did not start very well, and it is not only due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The long discussion between the main institution organizing the conference of the issue of governance reflects the difficulties of European Union is facing on a daily basis. The citizens do not know who is behind the wheel. The European Commission, the European Parliament, the Member States. Of course, for those familiar with the European bubble, the permanent needs to conciliate the point of view of the various institutions is obvious, but the average European citizen does not understand this. That is the reason was our former socialist president of the Committee of the Regions, Karl-Heinz Lamberts, and his counterpart in the Economic and Social Committee have called for a permanent and structured dialogue with the citizen through the local and regional authorities. Mayors and regional representatives are European actors, and they are well placed to create this link between the citizen and the European Union. The Conference on the Future of Europe is a great opportunity to reduce the gap between citizens and the European level. But it is also a great challenge. Indeed, if the hopes are high, the disappointment can be even bigger if citizens' legitimate demands for another, more effective and more empowering Europe are not taken into account at the end of the process. This is the reason why we should not exclude at the start of the process the idea of treaty change. Let's do this exercise without any taboos. Allow me to refer to some key aspects of a Europe that will be better than the one we have. We need a Europe with stronger competences when it comes to social rights across borders to create level playing field for Europeans, regardless of their nationality. Minimum wage, access to housing, to education or to training still vary dramatically in the European Union. We need a Europe that has the power to take key decisions in public health, emergencies. The management of the pandemic has learned us many lessons in this regard. We need a Europe with strong competency in connectivity in order to ensure that no person and no territory is left behind because of the lack of investment in critical digital infrastructure. We need a Europe with a strong stance on climate change and collective action to address it. The Green Deal is a tool that will prove effective only if we see collectively the bigger picture. We need a Europe with respectable own resources to be able to face the multiple challenges ahead. Last but not least, we need a Europe of true solidarity to address yet another looming migration crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, a Europe à la carte is bound to be a weak Europe. The conference on the future of Europe must be a true opportunity to make our union better for everyone's sake. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for your intervention. You gave us a socialist perspective, and now I think it is time to bring the social dimension on the table. And that's why, Christa Schweng, I bring you in, because you are, as I said, the president of the European Economic and Social Committee. So again, another important advisory body that involves the social partners in EU decision-making. You know, this has been one of the major political disagreements in the future of Europe debate ever since the beginning of the economic and financial crisis and the euro crisis. The role that, what is the correct economic, fiscal, social framework for Europe? Should Europe be more heavily involved in social policy? What is the role of health policy now? Because of the pandemic, we are discussing that very prominently. So I would ask you to give us a perspective on that.
Thank you very much for this question. And ladies and gentlemen, let me also thank the organizers of the Bled Strategic Forum, because for me this is really a very interesting, very inspiring event, and I'm really happy to be part of this. So thank you very much also for this invitation. If I may come back to the European Economic and Social Committee, the ESC is a body that encompasses employers' representatives, workers' representatives, trade unions, as well as civil society at large. And that means that diversity is one of our driving forces. This is what really drives us forward, but it's also the striving for consensus. But what we think is that diversity is inspiring, and diversity helps also to overcome old-fashioned thinking and to easily adapt to the future, or more easily adapt to the future. You've asked me about the need for a new economic and fiscal framework. And for the EC, it's quite clear. Economic, social, and societal progress are indivisible. So they are all part of one coin. You know that we've been in our deepest recession. The EU has been in the deepest recession since its creation in history. We are still not there yet. We see some light at the end of the tunnel. But what we call now for is an economy that really supports recovery, an economy that strives for investment, and that makes, integrates further the single market and finalizes the single market, and also ensures fair working condition, and at the same time is deepening the European Monetary Union. We've called for balanced economic policy that gives an equal weight to a range of diverse political issues. And this means sustainable and inclusive growth, full employment, public health, environmental sustainability. We think to achieve this economic balance, it is absolutely vital to involve organized civil society. And this has been confirmed when we drew up the Recovery and Resilience Regulation, because member states are asked to draw these plans up with the support of organized civil society. And we saw that in some member states it worked better, in some it worked less. But there is still some way to go, and we are glad that the Commission at least confirmed, and also the member states confirmed in this regulation, that there is a need to follow this bottom-up process and this bottom-up approach. We think also that the activation of the escape clause was important, but it needs now some sort of soft landing. It was important at the time, but now we need to come back to a different Europe, and we need to come back to a different fiscal framework. We need to finalize the banking union. We need to talk about tax policies to avoid tax evasion, and we need to deepen the banking and capital market union. When we look at the green transition, we see that the fiscal reform needs just transition for an economy that works for all and also includes indicators that go beyond GDP. We support also discussions on...
Christa, you have 1 minute left because
We support also the discussions shift towards qualified majority, but this is ongoing discussions. When it comes to the role of health and social policy, the ESC has said that we would like to see, we need to develop a vision for a stronger post-COVID Europe, and this must be a Europe that prospers economically, is socially inclusive and environmentally sustainable. And the next generation EU and the Recovery and Resilience Facility just showed that we need more than just money to solve the situation. We also need to overcome the pandemic and link it to a more social recovery. And here we have the European Pillar of Social Rights, we have the European Semester as processes to help us monitor the situation. And when we come to health policy, and this was also one of the questions that have been raised, we see the European success story behind that. If you think about the rollout of we saw that no member state, independently how small, how big it was, independently how affected they've been by the pandemic, we all saw that no member state alone could overcome this crisis. But what we saw also is that together, towards the vaccination program of the European Union, we could manage to really roll out vaccines properly. And since yesterday we have achieved this goal, we have 70% of the adult population in Europe vaccinated, fully vaccinated. And this was one of the main goals. We have diversities within Europe, but the goal is there and has been achieved. And when we talk about prices, how was it to purchase these vaccines? The price for one dose in Europe was 12 euros. In the US, it was 16 euros. And in Israel, 44 euros. So you can imagine this purchasing power that we are having and that we used really to the wealth of European citizens. So I think what we can do here is invest more in health projects and do more in this respect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I find it interesting that so far, I think the European Green Deal didn't feature very prominently in any of your speeches. Well, for example, while being, of course, the Commission's flagship, arguably, project for this term. And interestingly, Commissioner Schweizer this morning in her intervention in the leaders panel was mentioning that health seems to be at the bottom of interest in citizens' engagement in the platform on the Conference on the Future of Europe. Well, the Green Deal and EU democracy seems to be much more prominent, and therefore I would like to discuss, to bring now the issue of EU democracy and move to our two digital speakers, which have been very patient. I know it's not easy to follow the debate from there, because I think you can offer complementary and important perspectives on the state of EU democracy. So again, I will follow alphabetical order, as I have said at the beginning, and I will start with Apostolos Tzitzikostas, the President of the European Committee of the Regions, to ask you, again, some of your colleagues from the European Committee of the Regions mentioned this need for a more bottom-up approach, the possibility of strengthening the powers of the committee in EU decision-making to reinforce bottom-up legitimacy. So tell us a little bit, what mechanisms do you see? What is the role, what should be the role of the European Committee of the Regions and of the national level in the future of Europe and in the future of European democracy?
Thank you very much, dear friends. I'm right now in Thessaloniki together with Prime Minister Mitsotakis, who this morning was with you there at the Bled Strategic Forum. We are holding consecutive meetings today with local stakeholders and representatives of institutions here in Greece. So let me first congratulate the Slovenian organizers for this excellent event. And I also want to greet the President of the Economic and Social Committee who spoke before me, the chairs of the European Parliament, political groups, especially a politician that I value really high, Manfred, who concretely supported us in the context of the Conference on the Future of Europe. And of course, I would like to thank and say hello to my own colleagues from the European Committee of the Regions today. So your question basically touches the very essence of the functioning of European democracy. It's about the need to bring Europe closer to the people. So the simple question is, why should citizens today, and why my own children tomorrow, be motivated to support the very existence of the European Union? Do average European citizens know that the European Union delivers when their jobs depend on a competitive economy in a very challenging global market? When solutions must be urgently found to answer climate change, climate crisis, I might add. When schools and hospitals are being equipped, when our public services are digitalized. So I'm quite convinced, my dear friends, that we will not get the answer we are looking for if you ask today an everyday citizen of Europe. So what we need to do is a better job, because it is not the fault of the citizen who does not know what Europe does for him, but it's our fault that we have not managed to give him a clear message. Europe is in our everyday life. Europe is everywhere. But we need to go beyond Brussels, beyond Strasbourg and the capitals of the member states, and meet our citizens, listen to their needs in every region, city, and village. What do people want today? In my view, they need two things, basically: an efficient leadership and better proximity to their needs. They want a Europe that is closer and proactive. So in doing so, European and national governments can provide leadership, but no matter their size and power, they need the proximity and the efficiency of regional and local leaders on the ground. And this is exactly the crucial role of Europe's 1 million regional and local elected politicians, who were the first to provide help and protect citizens from the devastating floods and fires during this summer. We had many in Greece and elsewhere, of course, and who worked throughout the pandemic to keep jobs, family businesses, hospitals, and schools open during this very difficult period. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we must lead together, European, national, regional, and local levels, because Europe's recovery and resilience will start from the ground. And this is the message that we got from national leaders who are joining the European Committee of Regions efforts. For instance, Chancellor Merkel and Portugal's Prime Minister Costa have recently addressed our plenary sessions. Their example will be soon followed by Prime Minister Janša and President Macron during their respective EU presidencies and their presence to the European Committee of Regions plenaries. So this positive evolution confirms our concept of European House of Democracy, with the EU being the protective roof, the member states being the strong walls, and the regions and cities being its solid foundations. So the answer to the initial question that you asked me today is that only together we can bring Europe closer to people. And at this point, in closing this brief statement, I would like to thank people and statesmen like Manfred Weber, who has realized the importance of investing in regions, investing in citizens. We are the means to get Europe closer to the real needs of the people. So we are here, we want to be a part of this new effort that Europe is going to undertake in the very, very near future. And I am absolutely positive that together we can succeed. Thank you.
Thank you, President Tzitzikostas. And well, you introduced Chairman Weber better than I could have ever done myself. So I would like to ask Chairman Weber to thank him for his patience and to ask him, you have been leading for a significant amount of time, the biggest political force in the European Parliament. You have a very direct experience of European democracy as a former Spitzenkandidat, of its strength, of its weaknesses. So I would ask you a comment about the state of democracy and legitimacy in Europe and the ways in which the Conference on the Future of Europe can improve on that. But really, we are getting to the end of our initial round. So I would ask you, you have heard a lot, and therefore you can react, you can rebut many of the things you have heard. So Chairman Weber, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you, and thank you so much for the floor. If I may first also thank the Slovenian friends for organizing this. It comes in a very important moment of European history when we start now with the Future of Europe discussion on the conference level. The Slovenian contribution is crucial from a new member state, a small member state, but an important contribution to what is in the future ahead of us. That's why really congratulations to this format and to this discussion and this panel. And I also like very much that you include really all political families. That is what Europe makes democracy lively. We have the more conservative wing, the more future-oriented, the new friends, socialists, and so on the table. So thank you so much. What comes to my mind when I listen to the discussion? The first thing is, if we want to achieve that people believe in Europe, frankly speaking, we have to talk about the achievements. If we only talk about the negative things, sorry, people will not follow. And frankly speaking, to have no first and second class European during the coronavirus vaccination period was a great achievement for the European Union. So Germans, Italians, Slovenians, Bulgarians, Portugal people, everybody had the same chance of access to vaccination. And that is what Europe makes possible. So that is, I would say, let's talk about the achievements, what we together did also in the difficult times of Corona. The second thing that comes to my mind is that we talk about the future development. So all the question of what do we invent, what do we do as next steps. I hear also when I listen to my colleague from Italy, Giorgia Meloni, about this super state discussion, and I share the opinion that I personally don't want to have a super state. So there we share the opinion. But I want to underline that the last step we did for becoming an ever closer union. The last step we did was 1 year ago when we agreed on the recovery and resilience fund. The first time Europe is going to the market and is borrowing money with the Euro bonds on European level. That was highly crucial, highly discussed in Austria, in Netherlands, in Finland, in other countries. So we did it because we want to practice solidarity. Nobody is responsible for Corona. That's why we want to share and to show solidarity with our Spanish friends, with Italian friends, with those who are most hit by the crisis. So I would say the last step we did on more integration was a very positive to show solidarity after the Corona crisis. But that brings us not to a super state. And that was agreed by 27 member states unanimously. So when we talk about Europe, there is no EU bureaucrat who decides about the legislation. There are politicians elected. I tell you, for example, on the council side, whenever we do a legislation on the council side, we have on the council format, minister of format, we have nearly always unanimous on legislative files. Even our very critical Polish government is more than 90% in favor of concrete legislation in front on the table when it comes to the decision-making process. And also on the parliament side, we are elected members of parliament who decide about the legislation. So not bureaucrats are ruling Europe, our politicians are doing so. And the reason for Brexit, if I may be very precise, is that David Cameron was not responsible, was not behaving in a responsible way. He told people over the whole career what Europe made as problems, what bureaucrats created as problems. And 3 months before the Brexit took place, the vote took place, he changed his mind and told the Brits, now we need Europe, please stay inside of Europe. So what I ask is that everybody should take over responsibility. When a national minister votes in favor of a legislation in Europe, please go back home to your member country and to your capital and explain why you voted in favor, and don't complain about the outcome on Brussels. So what we need is responsibility. Another element I want to add is that I think we need leadership. What Apostolos said, we need leadership on European level. I tell you, I grew up in the 19th politically, not personally, but politically as a young man in Germany. And there Helmut Kohl and Theo Weigel told the Germans, forget about the Deutschmark, we do the euro together. And I tell you, that was in Germany totally unpopular, totally unpopular. But Kohl was convinced that this is the only chance to survive in a world with China, with America. The only chance is to do it together, to be united on the economic side. That was his conviction, and he fought for it. He argued for it. He tried to convince citizens in Germany and all over Europe for doing so. And it's the same with the French president at this time. So what we need is not only following the popular vote, if I may say. We need also this kind of leadership. And frankly speaking, Afghanistan is for me a wake-up call. That Europe is today not capable to defend for a limited period of time, for a few days, the Kabul airport. We are not capable to do so. We are depending on the Americans, and that is not what I want to see. I want to see a European defense pillar where together we are capable to do what is needed on global level. And another element, and I only have two additional ones. If you give me the time for this, is you spoke about democracy. You know how to make Europe more democratic. You know, there we don't have to invent anything new. You know how democracy works. Our local colleagues from the Committee of Regions know how democracy works. You need a candidate for becoming mayor, for example, and you need a program. And then you are running an election and people decide. And this principle is the same when you want to become Chancellor of Germany or Prime Minister of Italy. You have to have a candidate and you have to have a convincing program. That's a basic principle of democracy. And what I want to achieve is to do the same on European level. Why don't we have, like we did it, like we tried to do it with the Spitzenkandidaten concept, why don't we have a candidate for Commission President, I would say the leading personality in today's European Union, with a candidate nominated by a party and the program, and then people decide all over Europe. Probably with the Renew Franks, we can combine this with transnational lists. So let's think about how to make it more closer to citizens. But the key question is not the communication is a problem, not the transparency is a problem, not the question of complexity is a problem. The big problem is that people decide in the elections. And last time, more than 50% of citizens in Europe participated in the European elections. So people want to decide about the future of Europe. There is a will to do so. We only have to make it possible, and we have to make it understandable how the democratic procedure runs. And if you allow me, finally, for the future of Europe, one probably key question is identity. About national identity, European identity, and Apostolos for the regions, also regional identity. I'm from Bavaria, in the south of Germany. And I'm a proud Bavarian citizen. I love my home region. I'm proud about my background. I'm a German citizen. I have a German passport. That's my national identity. And I'm a convinced European. I believe in this project. I love to be together with European friends. And I don't think we should make a contradiction out of these three identities. They are together. They are the same. They are belonging together. And if you want to be a strong defender of your nation in today's global world, you have to be a true European if you want to defend your nation. That is what I want to say, because this identity, we should not play it against each other. It's a combination, it's together, and that is what EPP is standing for in what we are fighting for, process of a renewal process for the European Union.
Thank you very much, Chairman Weber, for this passionate plea in favor of the European project. We have one speaker left to end the first tour de table. And then I would suggest let's try to open it up. We probably will have time for a round of questions. If some of you in the audience has some questions, maybe this is the time to start thinking about it. And in due course, I will open it up, and you will be able to formulate your question. But before that, we have Marco Zanni, and I think some of what Chairman Weber mentioned is interesting. He mentioned, for example, foreign affairs, and how impotent we seem now towards, for example, the Afghan fiasco and everything that can derive from it. Mr. Zanni, you represent a group, Identity and Democracy, that defends European cooperation based on sovereign nations. And so I would like to delve a little bit deeper on this idea and how this would work in practice. For example, in the field of foreign affairs, wouldn't you say that foreign and defense policy, even in a confederal probably setup, such as defended by Giorgia Meloni, is a field where we need a stronger Europe. We need more European integration to matter. So please, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, and I will try to be brief to give the opportunity for a Q&A session, and thank you very much for the opportunity to address the forum on such an important topic, the future of Europe. We are in the middle of the worst crisis that we lived since the beginning of the European cooperation after the Second World War, and it's not one of the best period or the best moment for the European Union. So it's very important to discuss, and thank you very much to our Slovenian friends, because they started the presidency of the Council in a very competent way, in a moment that is not easy, in the middle of the coronavirus crisis, with the start of this very complicated discussion about the future of the European Union, and also today with these crises in Afghanistan. Going to this topic, if I may, I would like to point out something referred to what my colleague Manfred Weber said about the situation there, and the fact that the European Union had to rely on the US to save our people there, our staff there. So first of all, that's true, but that was not an European war. That was a US war. The European countries deployed few armies there. So basically, that was a US war, and that was a US-controlled territory. That's why we had to rely on US and on UK mainly to save our people that were stuck in Afghanistan. So talking more in general about foreign policy and all the discussion that we have today, or that we have since many years, since I remember the beginning of my first term in 2014, about having more cooperation in foreign policy, in defense, also in army, and also going towards the creation of a European army. So first of all, I think that that's also something we should do in the Conference for the Future of Europe. If we want to give a positive stance for the citizens about European cooperation, we don't need talking about dreams or chimeras that are not possible. We need to set out concrete solutions to the problems that European people have and are experiencing today. So, from our perspective on this field, I think that European cooperation is good, but we need to assess what is cooperation. Because if we are talking about creating an European army, I say no, it's impossible. There is no ground to create an European army, because simply we are not a nation, we are not a country, and a common army is the first and one of the most important features of a nation state. The European Union today is not a nation state, is not a federation, and in my opinion is pretty far from becoming a federation. So it's dangerous thinking about creating a European army without having the precondition So we did with the euro. We talked about the European integration in the past 20 years. So we started building our house from the roof and not from the pillars, from the basement. So that was a mistake. At that time was made because there were a huge political enthusiasm after the fall of the Soviet Union, after the fall of the Berlin Wall. So the political argument at that time was put forward, the technical, the economic rationale. And today, after almost 30 years from the Maastricht Treaty, we are still dealing on discussing how to fix the mistakes in building the common currency that we made at that time. So I will be cautious in talking about a common European army, because we are not a nation, we are not a federation, and it will be very dangerous talking about this. And I don't think it will be also valuable for European people. But if we talk as we do as Identity Democracy Group about how to improve the cooperation between nation states, I think that in the field of defense we could cooperate better. And we need to cooperate better, because the main message that I see coming from the crisis in Afghanistan is that there will be, in the near future, a great change in how geopolitics development, mainly for the Western world in the past year. So the US doesn't want to be the world policeman, so the peacekeeping country or the main geopolitical power acting pretty much everywhere and protecting the Western world. So we have to be conscious of what is changing, and we need to cooperate better in this field. But that is already happening in the institutional, but mainly in the private world. So defense companies are cooperating together. Italian, French, German, Dutch, European private companies are cooperating to make our defense better. Again, we cannot just see in order to make our defense policy more effective. We cannot just look at the European Union. But since it's a geopolitical issue, we need to rely also to other like-minded partners, like the UK or still the US or other countries that are not part of the European Union. So that's what I see as cooperation. If we talk about going towards European army, I say no, it's dangerous. But looking at how the world is developing, how the United States are disengaging from the geopolitical scenario, I think that there is space for cooperation between our nation. But we have to understand, that that's my last message, that without our nation cannot exist a European democracy. And very last sentence about European democracy. Manfred Weber and the other colleagues talked about European democracy. And Mr. Weber said that we know how democracy works. The European Union know how democracy works. But sometimes, and I hope that this will be an exercise that we will do in the conference for the future of Europe, we also have to look at our inside, because our democracy is not perfect sometimes. And we have a very good example in the European Parliament that from what I can see, it's the only democratic parliament where we have a parliamentary majority preventing the minorities from having an institutional representation. So that's something that should be fixed if we really want to show that European democracy works and that the European Parliament is the house of democracy in the European Union. If not, if we are not able to fix our mistakes, we will not able to discuss and to make Europe better.
That's clear, and there is a lot to discuss, and I'm sure that Chairman Weber and the other speakers will have a lot to add to that. But I am told that Giorgia Meloni
has to leave us because she has a flight to catch, and therefore I would like to allow her to take the floor a second time. Feel free to comment about everything that was said, but I would like to ask you specifically again a comment on foreign and defense policy. It seems to me that there is a lot of scope, even much more than what Mr. Zanni was saying, under your framework for defense and integration in the EU, but perhaps I understood you wrongly. And also a comment on the rule of law. The rule of law was mentioned by some of the speakers, and we in the EPP had a long history of problems, as you know, with Fidesz and Viktor Orban, which was concluded a few months ago. You in the ECR have a similar situation. Arguably, therefore, I would ask you, isn't it right that there should be, in a constitutional order such as the EU is a constitutional order, an enforcement of fundamental values at the supranational level, and therefore also, for example, a link between the disbursements of EU funds and the protection of fundamental values at the national level? What is your stance on that dossier?
Thank you very much. I've got a few minutes, so I ask my colleagues to forgive me if I won't listen to the words after me, but I've got only 1 hour plane, so I need to take it. About defense and foreign policy, as I probably told before, I don't remember, I'm not against the idea of a common defense in Europe. The problem is that you cannot have a common defense if you don't have a common foreign policy. And the problem now with Europe is that the EU doesn't have a foreign policy. And we see it with the Afghan crisis. For we only spoke about what to do with the refugees, but nobody spoke about what is happening with the Afghan crisis. I mean, we will have the fundamentalism standing tall. We will have China going ahead. We've got the problem of Pakistan, which is a country of 2,000 million of citizens, and with the atomic bomb, that is the only one between the Islamic states, which risk to finish under the influence of Taliban. Nobody's speaking about that. We only speak, as we were the Red Cross, about what to do with refugees. That I was happy with, because the European Council of yesterday said exactly what I was saying, that Europe should help the countries near Afghanistan to help them to give a home to these refugees. But the only debate in Europe was this one. And we saw it in many other topics. I mean, we could speak about Libya, what happened in Libya, where everybody went doing whatever wanted to do, and there wasn't only one position. So you don't need a common defense if you don't have a common foreign policy. And that is the problem. When I speak about a confederal Europe, I'm speaking exactly about that. There is no need to tell the national countries how the zucchini should belong if you don't agree on the important topics. And the important topics is that Europe should be a political giant. Today, it is a bureaucratic giant and nothing else. So when we will have a common view about how to be in the geopolitical situation, for example, then, in my opinion, we can absolutely discuss about a common defense. And this is what, in my opinion, Europe should face. About the rule of law. Well, I absolutely believe in democracy, and rule of law is a milestone of a democratic system. The problem is that, in my opinion, rule of law in the EU institution has often been used to attack political opponents with an incredible use of double standards. I mean, for example, we speak about they attack the Poland for the justice reform, while, for example, in my country, we have continuous scandals about the political orientation and the lack of independence of judges, and nobody says nothing. Or, for example, they attack the Hungarians for their secure border policies, but in these days, nobody says nothing with Lithuania that, in my opinion, legitimately is trying to block the illegal migrants that Belarusian is using against them. We hear attacks about information freedom, but no one did nothing after the terrible murder of the journalist Daphne Caruana Galizia, which casted same shadows on the Maltese government. And the most terrible thing, in my opinion, is from these double standards comes the threat of blocking the money of the Next Generation EU, which should instead support the economic recovery. Manfred Weber was saying that this was a great step for Europe, a great step of solidarity. I agree, I in part agree with it. I absolutely agreed with the recovery fund, with the common debt. We sustained it, okay? Things didn't go exactly as we hoped, but it was a first step, and it was an important first step. But let me tell, and I close, let me tell to Manfred Weber that if the base of those money is solidarity, you cannot use them as a threat. You cannot use them to blackmail. You cannot use money that countries need to save their people and to save their enterprises as a threat, if solidarity is the word.
Okay. If you have to leave, because I will allow Manfred Weber, obviously, to reply. I don't know whether you have to leave immediately or...
Okay. Unfortunately, yes.
In that case, I would like to thank...
I will ask my friends to tell me what he said.
We'll let you know. Anyway, I would like to thank you...
I'm really sorry, but I have no chance.
I would like to thank you for your presence, and I would ask also
thank you, everybody.
Our friends here to thank her with a round of applause. Now, there is a lot that was put on the table, I think, for Chairman Weber, and therefore I would like to immediately return to him. At least, Chairman Weber, of course, you can intervene on whatever you like, but there are three things that I think you really should address. The first is the EU army, and more generally, foreign and defense policy. Because what can be done there? Is Marco Zanni right? The second is the rule of law used as a threat. So what is the EPP perspective there? The third is the idea that minorities in the European Parliament are somewhat silenced by this tendency to have a permanent grand coalition of mainstream parties. So I would like, if possible, you to take a stance on these three issues. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the floor and for the chance to react. And I really appreciate enlightenment and strong exchange of views on this substance. So thank you so much for this. Let me start with some minorities. My colleagues know that whenever there is a discussion going on, I try to balance things. The EPP is trying to balance things. I want to recall that Antonio Tajani, as former president of the European Parliament, tried really to do his best to make it in a transparent and open way for all groups, and especially on the future of Europe. We assured that all groups, also those who are skeptical to the future, have a place there, have a voice there, have the full access to all documents and to everything. So that's why we are trying to do our best to guarantee this, and EPP wants to do so. The second thing is about content, and first about rule of law. Yes, when we as politicians speak about rule of law, I confirm what my colleague Manfred said about that sometimes you have the feeling that this is also misused for party political reasons. And that's why my party, the EPP, was supporting the so-called rule of law mechanism. And that was, for me, a great achievement from Socialists, the Renew team in the European Parliament, who was really a front runner in this subject. Also, our Green colleagues were supporting this, and the EPP was close in supporting the idea in the debate about the recovery fund money and the budget for the European Union, the multi-annual framework. There we achieved this rule of law mechanism. And what is the story behind? It's not a technical thing. The story behind is that in the future you only can act against countries who are breaching rule of law if you have a solid ground. And finally, if the Court of Justice in Luxembourg gives the green light, So what we need is a fact-based assessment on rule of law. If you want to protect rule of law, you have to make it fact-based. That is what EPP is insisting in, what we want to fight for. There are several reasons. I fully subscribe the question of Malta about Daphne Caruana Galizia, which was not equally treated like the Hungarian problems, like the problems in Poland. So we have not only a problem for the so-called new member states in Central and Eastern Europe, we also have problems in the old countries, if I may say, of Europe. And that's why we need a fact-based assessment and then also tough tools to defend it. And all these cases must finally end up as a court case in Luxembourg, and then judges decide. Rule of law is not an assessment for politicians. Rule of law is finally an assessment and a decision for judges. And the real big question, and I'm really grateful for this debate that we really focus on this so much, the real discussion in the future of Europe for the next 10 years is obviously the debate about foreign affairs and defense. That is what Europe has now in front of us, whether we want to strengthen our capacity. And yes, I fully underline there is in a lot of fields currently look to the China approach of Europe. There is no common European understanding about how to answer the China challenge in the future. And it's obviously the biggest one for the future. But the question is not to describe that there is a failure of Europe, that we cannot manage to come to a common understanding. The question is, how can we do it in the future? And that's why I insist we have to stop the unanimous vote decision-making process on foreign affairs, because that is blocking the economic power of Europe to bring it to the political power, which we need on global level. And if we can do so, if we have a common understanding, and if we are not blocked anymore by national egoism, sometimes also paid by the Chinese ambassadors in our capitals all over Europe, we see the link, how they are active, how they are trying to split Europe up and trying to create tensions inside of Europe. That's why we need to stop the unanimous vote decision-making process on foreign affairs. And I would not go directly to the European army, but I want to say, having the cyber war in mind, having the question of drones in mind, drones technologies in mind, I think it obviously makes sense for every citizen to tell them, sorry, it's more cost efficient if we do the defense on cyber war as Europeans together. And that's why let's start, for example, with a cyber defense brigade on European level, where we have virtual soldiers who have on their shoulder a European flag, that we can show citizens together we are stronger, we can defend ourselves in today's world in a much better way. That are the considerations we need, and there I saw that the Bled Strategic Forum was an extremely constructive discussion today to come to these results. But for me, it's important not to describing the problem, we need solutions. And I see that a lot of parties in the European Parliament are ready to contribute to these solutions with different perspectives, but we are ready, and we have to use now the Future of Europe conference for this.
Thank you very much. We are running a little bit late, but we started a little bit late. There is no time for a Q&A, I'm afraid, and there is no time for a long second round for the speakers who only took the floor once. But I would like to do one simple thing and ask all of the speakers to tell us just one word on one value that if they have their way about the future of Europe, if Europe is shaped in the future as they would like it, what is the one value or the one word that citizens, in their opinion, would associate with this sort of Europe? So very simple, very fast, as a closing round. And I suggest that we do this in reverse order, that we start from Mr. Zanni. So if you have your way, cooperation.
Yes, it's identity.
You're only allowed identity.
Identity,
okay.
Because it's why we decided to call our new group in 2019 Identity and Democracy. Because we have seen in the past that sometimes the European Union tried to homologate our different identities by law, forcing by law. And that's not good. That's created divergency between European countries and not cooperation. So without recognizing and protecting our different identities that are values, not obstacle to the cooperation, we will not be able to have a proper democracy in Europe.
Okay,
that's why.
Clear enough. That's more than one word, but okay. A lot. Chairman Weber, what about you? What is the one word that if Europe is shaped in the future the way you think you should, citizens would associate with it? Oh, we lost him.
He agrees with me.
Okay. Apostolos Tzitzikostas also left us. I don't see him anymore. Then I would suggest that we just go very quickly in reverse order. So, Christa, Schweng, one word.
Sorry, 2 words as well. It's participation and solidarity.
Okay, thank you. Christophe, Rouillon.
Yes, it is solidarity because without the European Union and the solidarity mechanism put into all the different policy, it will be a total disaster for the citizen being in France and Italy. And I think that
what is the word again?
Without solidarity, it will be
solidarity
will be a disaster without the common budget for investment to save Italy, France, and other country with euro and the common debt. It would be a total disaster. I think that Mr. Zani would like to destroy Europe and with fake news and fairy tales. And I think that we have a different vision because we built the house in the beginning with the foundation, our value, and after first step with
that's very clear.
Trade zone and agriculture, cohesion policy, culture, and now the roof. It is social pillar. A timber work will be
social pillar. Sorry, but I really need to wrap this up. Sorry about
and
that.
And a tight defense policy.
Badly
and
over
I
time.
think with the house will be very strong.
So,
finally.
Mr. Geblewicz?
I think that I would say efficient cooperation based on the rules, inclusive cooperation close to the people.
Cooperation, okay. Mr. Decoster?
As Olgierd took already efficiency, I would just say one word, union. We have to be a union. So we have to share things. We have to share action, we have to share values. So we have to be really a truly united union.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I think we need to bring it to a close. We are a little bit over time, but I think we respected the overall duration of the panel quite to the minute. I will not give you any big conclusion. Let me just say 2 things that I it's impossible to summarize because, of course, part of it was about differences, but one trend maybe and one vision. The trend is that it seems to me EU politics is moving from disruptive polarization to constructive competition. If you remember when this polarization, this politicization of the EU started, it was all about the establishment, the pro-European establishment, and the anti-EU populist. I have the impression that now there are much less anti-system voices in this conversation. There are differences, but even in confederalism, even in sovereignism, no one really questions the need for supranational cooperation in Europe. And I think that is progress. That trend is positive. Second, a vision impossible to find something that keep all this together, but I thought that an emphasis on subsidiarity, subsidiary Europe, with very different definitions of subsidiarity was present in the different interventions. For the Committee of the Regions representative, because of course they are regional representatives and they have a bottom-up approach to governance. For the EPP, because Christian Democrats have, after all, originated the concept, and for the more right-wing forces, because it somehow catered to their idea of a more confederal Euro that respects identities better. So I think these are the 2 points that I would give you as takeaway. I thank you very much for your patience. It's very late, so it's dinner's time. But let's thank the speakers with a round of applause.